Come with me to take some creative portraits on my Fujifilm GFX 50S with a vintage lens that I'll actually break down for you in just a moment. If you're anything like me, you get bored of taking the same portraits session after session. I noticed I was stuck in a loop going back to the same poses and prompts that I've done 100 times. But I realized that my boredom wasn't just about the images, but it was more about my approach to taking the images. More on that in just a minute. It took me a long time to dial in what exactly I love about this combo of using a vintage lens on my medium format digital camera to create images just like this. So let's talk a little bit more about this combo and what I'm actually shooting with here. What I'm using right now is my Fujifilm GFX 50S. This is a medium format digital camera made from Fujifilm. This is one of their older models of their medium format line of cameras on the medium format side of things. And I got it just because I wanted to try out this medium format look and see what it was all about. But just like on all of my other digital cameras, I started to get really bored of just the clinical sharpness and just the perfection of all of the images. So I did some research and I found out that you can actually adapt vintage lenses to this camera body. And so what I'm actually shooting on here is a 50mm 1.4 lens from Minolta. And the thing that I really love about this lens is that it's meant for a 35mm film camera. So it's a really old lens. I think this probably goes back to like the 70s or something like that. And there's so many imperfections and just like beautiful nuances to these lenses that make them technically like bad, I guess, but I think that those imperfections are what we are striving for in this overly perfect digital age, especially when all of the lenses and cameras out there are going to create a beautiful image. So I really love using this because it's like one of those things that cinematographers say about dirtying the frame. I love to dirty the frame and make my images, make my photos stand out a little bit without all of the post-processing. I know you can do a lot of this in Lightroom, but I'm a big proponent of doing it in camera in real life. And I think that those limitations and those nuances of shooting it in the real world live as a couple is in front of you is going to give you a very unique approach to shooting those images that's just really going to make the final product much different. One of the things that's really interesting about this combo is that this lens is actually meant for a full frame equivalent camera, such as a normal 35mm camera. So technically this lens isn't able to cover the full sensor of this camera. So there's a little bit of vignetting on the corners and there's a little bit of distortion because you're actually using the full perimeter of the lens. And so it's as more as you get away from the center, that sharpness really falls off and you get this really soft, unique look, which I am really striving for in my images these days. We're also seeing a lot of people editing their images to look like it's being shot on like an old film camera. And one of the biggest things that people love about that look is halation. So around any sort of bright parts of the images, like right over here, you're seeing a glow on this practical light I have in the frame. If this was shot on film, you may actually notice that there could be a little red halation around there from the light coming through the camera, bouncing off the back of the film back, and then spilling back onto the film negative on the red layer of the film. So that's what creates that red kind of halation on film, and I'll show you some of my images that I've taken on, Cine Still 800T or 50D or anything like that, 400D, and it's just this really cool look. On this, you're able to get that similar sort of look using this lens because of artifacting and distortion. And so since this lens is clinically imperfect, you do get a little bit of that distortion and glow naturally around the highlights. And that could probably be because of the glass that's in it. Maybe there's some lens fungus or whatever is in there that over time kind of builds up and decreases the quality of the images. But it is something that I really, really love. Going all the way back to talking about dirtying the frame, this is one of those imperfections that I think looks really cool. So I wanted to take you down here to Leif Erikson Park. This is where I shot Jackie and Troy's engagement photos last June. And as much as I would love to have a real couple here and show you some of the photos that we're making in real time, that's a video that we have coming later this summer, which I'm super excited about. But for today, I just want to focus on this camera, this setup, and this shoot that I already did without having to worry about any VTS or anything like that. but we are in the same location, and I'm gonna show some photos that we took during the shoot on the screen as we go. And some of my favorite shots that we took were just as we were walking down to the spot where we were actually going to take photos. So keep in mind, when you're going out and you're shooting, let's say you're doing a portrait session, it's not only just about getting to the location that you're going to, it's also about documenting the journey of getting there. And that's what takes a photo session from just being about taking photos to being about photojournalism and storytelling. And so my whole approach during the session was just to get us down here and just to create some photos that were just telling a story of these two going out on a date. Something that we had as kind of like a theme for this particular shoot, something that was really important to the couple, was doing a like Taylor Swift Eras inspired thing. And as much as I'm not like that big of a Taylor Swift fan, one of the albums that Bon Iver worked on with her, I think it's Folklore, some of those songs on there I really enjoyed. And so we used a lot of that inspiration for the outfits that they were using, the location we went to, the vibe, and all of that just kind of really lended itself to using a more vintage kind of like ethereal sort of look. And so that is what created the images that really made this whole shoot come together. And so back to actually talking about the Fujifilm camera itself, why this camera? Why a medium format camera? Why not adapt this lens to a full frame digital camera like my Sony a7 IVs? And it all goes back to the approach. When I'm shooting on the a7 IV, I can just go like, click, click, click with my shutter and just like take a bunch of images back to back to back. But this camera, it's older. And so like when you take an image, it's so slow. And it slows me down when I'm working with clients. And so I can't just take high speed burst images. It really is the most akin relationship I have to a film camera that is a digital camera, So I really love using this camera because it slows me down, because it feels as close to shooting film as possible without actually having to shoot film, pay for that, send it out to the lab, especially when I'm just wanting to be a little bit more experimental and creative. And not everything that I shoot, I want to be shooting on film. Some things I want to shoot on digital and be able to get it back and review it right away. It also impacts the way that I work with my clients too. And it slows me down and actually helps me have an actual conversation with my clients about what we're shooting, about what's happening in this story that we're trying to tell in this session. And when I'm on my other digital cameras, I find myself just like, again, just being so caught up in the technical perfections of it, the composition, the posing and the prompts, and I start to lose connection with the human across from me. And so I really love using a camera that does slow me down because it also makes me slow down and communicate with my subjects, the couples, whoever, a little bit better. So what I want to challenge us all to do is push each other to be more creative. You don't need to go out and buy this. You don't need to get this exact setup, but what gear do you currently have right now that you could use in a different sort of way to create images that you haven't really created before? Let me know what you plan on doing down in the comments. Let's all support each other and bounce some ideas off of each other. And thank you so much again for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you right back here in the next one.